My phone rings and it's a Vegas area code. And I'm like, who the hell is calling me from Las Vegas? So I answer it, and it's Rocky LaPorte from Brad Garrett's comedy club at the MGM Grand. He's the guy that played Robert Barone in Everybody Loves Raymond. And I'm just like, oh my God, Rocky LaPorte's calling me on my personal cell phone. Timing is really literally everything in stand-up.
Welcome back to Mic'd Up. I'm your host, Mike DiCioccio, alongside our co-host, Dave Ragu Ragosa. We have a special guest today, somebody that I've known my entire life, literally, and I was his first audience member that got to witness his comedic genius from a young age. He's an author, illustrator, cartoonist, and a stand-up comic. Welcome to the show, my brother from the same mother, Wally DiCioccio.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome.
Welcome to the show, my man.
It's about time you had me on this thing.
Mike, before you get started, I got to ask two questions. One, who's the older brother, who's the younger brother, and who kicked whose ass when they were younger?
All right, so I want you to guess who's older and who's younger first.
Oh, that's tough. You put me on the spot. It's I've never actually physically, so I haven't met Wally. For everyone who's listening, I haven't met or watching, I haven't met Wally, so it's tough. But I would say you guys are very close in age, closer than anticipated. I'd say
people
Wally
thought we were
has
twins
you.
when we were little. People thought we were twins.
Maybe Wally has you by a little bit.
Yeah, in age.
You got it?
Yeah,
And I got him in about a foot in height. I got him in a foot in height.
Yeah. Is it a foot?
No,
it's close.
8 inches.
Yeah, he's got me in height. I don't know who won in the fights. Like, we both pretty much roughhoused pretty.
We didn't actually physically get in too many fights. I know one time when I had braces, you clocked me right in the jaw. I was like, that wasn't too smart. Like mom and dad weren't too happy about that because they cost like $3,000. But yeah, we didn't really fight too often, which honestly, like Dave, Wally and I were we were like real close. He would say, jump off a bridge and I would do it, that kind of thing. When I said in the intro that I was his first audience member, that was legitimate. Like, I remember being 2, 3, 4 years old, and he was always like kind of just making the family laugh and kind of being the ham. And, whether it was in front of the family camcorder or just our parents on the couch, he was always hamming it up. And I'd just be sitting there like, look at this guy. He's like a cartoon character, live action cartoon character.
So as you know, we grew up in snowy Buffalo, and I was the middle child. So I kind of like craved attention. I was always trying to get attention from my parents. And Mike, he's the youngest. So it was like our sister was like the more, smart one in school, and she got good grades and stuff. I was never the sharpest knife in the drawer. I felt like the expectations in life were that, I wouldn't really amount to anything. Like, oh, this kid's going to be a joke. So I was just playful, and I'd always just kind of like mess around and make everyone laugh and Mike laugh or cry, depending on the day. But yeah, I was always trying to I've always tried to have that inner person, like my 8-year-old self, and have that, I always felt there was something special about me that, if my mom had the camera rolling, like the camcorder, I'd always try to, vocalize something or like do an impression or put on a show, like Mike was saying.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Dave, you want to know how far I would listen to my brother? I don't think I've ever shared this story on the podcast, but I got to share this one real quick and then we'll get into your story, Wally. But
Ice cream truck?
The ice cream truck. I got to tell the ice cream truck. Should I? I kind of got to. It's not that long of a story. So we're in the driveway at the house we grew up in, and ice cream, we hear the song, the Mr. Frosty or whatever, but it happens to be a woman driving the truck. She's getting closer and closer. And Wally says to me,
Mr.
Mike, what's that?
Mr. Softy.
I guess it was Mrs. Softy. And he says to me, if you take a quarter, you throw a quarter at the truck, she's going to catch it and she'll throw you back whatever ice cream you want. I'm like, this is brilliant. Like we got this technology already. So I grabbed the quarter And, I wasn't I played T-ball and stuff, and like I could throw, but I didn't think I was that good. I throw this quarter and it hits the side of the truck, and literally it was like ding, like the whole entire neighborhood heard it like resonating. She looks over at me and gives me the finger, right? She's telling me I'm number one. And she's screaming, your parents, this and that and the other thing. And she's driving by and I'm just like, what happened? Like, what you told me that I was supposed to get
my ice cream?
Yeah, where's my ice cream? That's how much I would follow him. So there you go. There's a real life story.
Did you get the ice cream though?
Did not get the ice cream. I just got yelled at and told I was number one.
She screamed at him. But yeah, no ice cream.
Hey, ice cream, you scream. We all scream for ice cream. Hey, I want you, everyone who's tuning in, first of all, thank you for being with us, whether you're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, however you tune into your podcast. I want you to know that you can check out Wally's content. His link tree is actually in the show notes. I make it clickable, as you guys know. So we got all that there for you. Wally, what I want you to do is take us back to that first moment. Now, I was too little to remember this, but I remember you kind of told me you had a moment when you first witnessed stand-up comedy. Share what actually inspired you to become a stand-up, and like, how did that whole journey begin?
Well, it's a good question. Dave, I mean, you're Italian, you know how it is. You grow up in an Italian-American family. Dad worshiped the Yankees. You're a Yankee fan, so you know that. He worshiped the Yankees. Mom worshiped the Saints. And by Saints, I mean like St. Anthony, St. Jude, not like Drew Brees or anything like that. Dad always sounded like a cartoon character. He was a funny guy. He sounded like some character from Hanna-Barbera. He'd be like, hey, how do you like those apples, sonny boy? And like, he really sounded like that. He had that like crazy, awesome personality. He always like lit up the room. He'd say stuff like just zany things like, what do you got your eyes on your feet? Like if you don't see something, like if you tripped on something or,
My favorite dad line was when we were in the car and people would be driving slow and he goes,
what do you got, eggs in the street?
Yeah, what do they got, eggs in the street?
Yeah, like if they're driving slow, like why is that what are you gonna like veer around eggs? Like who's afraid of driving over those, But he always told me that you got to speak with conviction, and at times I could be a quiet, shy kid when we were younger and stuff, but like at home I was probably the loudest one and always putting on a show, like I said. But he's like, you got to have a plan. That was always one thing I remember he always used to say. But throughout life, I always feel like my plan never works. Like nothing ever works out. So what he should have said was, you got to have a backup plan. Cause sometimes plans aren't like the greatest. Now mom, she's funny too. Last time she came to visit in Florida, I haven't seen her for like several months. So I was like, hey, how are you? We're like greeting each other and hugging and stuff. And she's like, oh, there's this little girl at the airport named Piper. What kind of name is Piper? You stink, Piper. Time to change your diaper. And I'm just like, yeah, Ma, okay. Great to see you too. Like she's just so weird like that. But she'll be here in a few days, by the way. She's flying back down. But my earliest influences were like my parents, or our parents, I should say. They're both like goofy. They liked goofy comedy. That was kind of my earliest influences. Like the Three Stooges were.
I was going to ask.
Huh?
No, I was going to ask, was mom, dad, were they like anyone like a kind of semi-comedian in the family? They kind of
they were just
influence you at all?
Just funny in their own ways. But we would watch the Three Stooges, and I always tell people, I'm like, Three Stooges were our babysitter. Like we would just plop in front of, we had one of those wooden Sylvania TV sets with the dials, early 80s.
It was a piece of furniture.
Yeah, it was furniture. It's still down there, right?
Yeah, we still have it.
Basement. But like, it's wooden. It's like tough, like it's heavy. And, you'd sit in front of that thing, and it was the tail end of all the stuff from the early 80s was just stuff from the leftovers from the 70s. But we'd sit there, watch the Three Stooges on a Saturday morning or something like that. I remember with Dad, we used to watch like HBO specials, Comedy
Faulty
Central.
Towers too. We used to watch
Faulty
Stooges,
Towers,
Faulty Towers, Monty Python. Way earlier
Monty
than we
Python.
should have had our eyes on any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We'd watch stuff on Showtime like Gallagher, John Panette, Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney was huge. Mom would just laugh, slap her knees like every time he would walk out. He's doing his thing. He's up here, by the way, on the wall. I'll move the camera. See?
Yeah.
But yeah, she would laugh like just at the sight of them. Gallagher, as I said, George Carlin, Harlan Williams, Rocky LaPorte. Anytime we'd watch these stand-up specials, like I was just like, I'm like, wow, like this is great. I was a big fan of Seinfeld, not the show so much as the comedian Jerry Seinfeld. Mr. Bean, Mike, Mr.
Yeah.
Bean, big Jim.
Oh, Mr.
Carrey.
Bean, yep.
It's
Yeah,
so funny
Jerry
because
Adams.
now full circle, Dave, as you know, Isabel's 9. So now it's like watching Mr. Bean with her. She's not that much into the Stooges because the slapstick isn't really her thing, but she's like getting a kick out of Mr. Bean. And as a parent, it's just great, right? Just to see that.
For sure.
But yeah, that
I'll
was...
say, Wally,
Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, you're kind of going into the question I was going to ask is really, from a kind of historian kind of a viewpoint, which comedians, authors, cartoonists kind of influenced you to kind of, and you kind of mentioned some, but was there one or two that like, hey, these two really kind of focused me into kind of what I wanted to do in my career?
I think I would have to go with Jerry Seinfeld. I always tell the story. I was going to get to the, eventually get to it. I kind of have long-winded stories, but Mike got me this book right here. Well, actually, I don't know if he got it. I think he recommended it, and then I went out and bought it. So
Sign language? Yeah.
Sign Language by Jerry Seinfeld. He was. I think you were reading it in school.
Miss Meany or Mrs. Meany? You had her too, didn't you, in high school?
Yeah. So
she said like she basically just said grab a book in the classroom and you got to write a book report on it. I'm like, this Seinfeld guy's on TV. This probably won't be so bad. And I was like pissing my pants laughing, and I couldn't wait to get home to tell Wally, and the rest is history, right? There it is.
So yeah, it's like he was just telling me these jokes, and I'm just like, hey, that's pretty good. But come to find out, like a lot of it, when we watched one of his stand-up specials, a lot of it's on there. I think it was the one called For the Last Time Only or something like that.
I'm telling you for the last time.
I'm telling you for the last time. And he did a lot of the jokes like are in this book. So when I heard like how he, I learned more about Seinfeld, how he like sat there and wrote jokes and worked at it. And it kind of like, he's kind of like a Socrates of like making people laugh. Like every little word, if the word just kind of gets like a, like he turns it to a ha-ha. Like he elevates each little word to make it even funnier. And he just like, there's definitely a science to it. But we used to watch everything like Adam Sandler, Naked Gun movies, Leslie Nielsen.
Oh my God.
Ray Romano
so
was big in our household. Curb Your Enthusiasm we love.
That was a little bit later though, but when we were kids, it was definitely Stooges. Sandler, we were just turned like early teens for Sandler. So like we kind of like looked up to him in a way where he was like goofy, but at the same time he was kind of in a weird way like Happy Gilmore. He was cool, but like you rooted for him. He's like trying to make money for his grandma and that whole kind of thing. I bought as a Bills, Sabres, Buffalo guy, I actually have a Boston Bruins jersey, and I got it just because I liked Happy Gilmore that much. It's actually a Ray Bork, so it's like a collectible, but yeah.
Now the sequel's coming out. So we'll see how that is.
Yeah.
I keep getting retargeted on social media to be in that. Like I keep
casting calls.
I keep getting casting calls, but Dave, it's out in your neck of the woods. You should be on there. Maybe you could be the next. You're not gonna make this shot, jackass. That could be Ragosa.
I think that guy passed away.
I love that movie.
Yeah, he passed away, so they need you.
So if you fast forward real quick, Wally, are you a Sebastian fan? Like who are you following now? If there is anybody.
There really isn't anyone that I'm especially following per se, but yeah, we're big Sebastian fans. Mike's also a fan.
It took me a minute. He was like a one of those, like someone shows you a music album, and at first you're like, this is weird. It might be like Radiohead or something the first time you hear them. And then after like 2 or 3 listens, you're like, this is freaking really good. With him, he was a little like the animated style of dancing around on the stage. When I first saw that, I'm like, this guy's trying too hard. Then he gets into the bit when he's like, mom's on the ground doing the army crawl for the Jehovah's Witness or whatever. Army crawl. That whole thing, I was pissing my pants. That was so funny. And then every special since
Grandma's
then.
throwing the lasagnas up the stairs. Like, that's the best.
There's a sword under the couch in the living room. Like that whole bit. I was sold.
Company
Yeah.
cake and the Sanka. Like everyone
Yeah.
have
Those
that in
crap
town.
cakes there. The crap cakes are for you kids. The good stuff. Yeah, that's
But
for the company.
we saw
Yeah.
him in Buffalo at Helium right before he popped. He was like on TV, had a few specials. He was at Side Splitters too in Tampa right before he popped, and we saw him with Mom. So this is a picture of the two of us right up here,
Mm-hmm.
me and Sebastian. So that was really cool. And then that underneath is the ticket that he autographed. So yeah, I'm a big fan of his.
I like that he was so, accessible. Like he came to Buffalo, and even I don't know if he does it now because obviously he's like selling arenas. He like sold 4 or 5 in a row, Madison Square Gardens in a row a couple years ago. He's probably not meeting fans unless it's like VIP. But you're right, man. I saw him. I don't think you were in Tampa already, so I don't remember who I went with. Or were you? Did you come to town? I don't remember if you were there.
Maybe you went with Andy or something, but like I swear that you were with us when we went.
I saw him like 2 or 3 times. So when I saw him though, it was funny. He was kind of joking. He's like, "Oh, there's a whole another section in the back of this club. Like, I guess I got to work on my material more," because he didn't even sell out Helium, which is like, what, a 200 seat place. And not even a year later, he was like the biggest name in comedy. So we just got him right before the peak and got to hang with him. And yeah, he's been on, Rogan, and yeah, he's definitely exploded and has a movie out.
I saw him in Borgata a few years ago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, actually twice. I saw him back-to-back Christmases in Borgata. And that's the same thing. He was like on his way up. He wasn't there yet. He wasn't doing movies with De Niro and, all that stuff, but he was on his way. But he was still, for Borgata, he was packing it for sure. It was all sold out.
I'm just going to show my ignorance here. Is Borgata a comedy club in Jersey?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the casino in Atlantic City.
Oh, okay. I got to come hang with you more, man. Hey, if I move, I'm not going to say if, when I move to Philly, I'll just be,
you're right there.
I'm an hour and a half out. We'll meet at the table, split a blackjack.
Yep.
There you go.
For sure.
Yeah.
But so as I'm like reading this, hanging out in like high school, the cool thing with like that I remember from high school. So I was a senior and Mike was a freshman, but I guess maybe it was cool for you because you got to hang out with all the guys I hung out with were all seniors and friends of mine. But just from hanging out at the house, like Mike knew them all. So he instantly got to go from like hanging as a freshman. He was already like up with the seniors and hanging around.
He had street cred.
They're like, why is this freshman in the senior cafe sitting at a table with 12 seniors?
And we always found ourselves in crazy places or situations where we had no business being. We would just walk around the mall, like right before it was closing, just like trying to meet girls and like bowling alleys or like places that were still under construction and just wandering around with like in weird situations. But before all this, like before my interest in movies, to be honest, like I always wanted to be or not movies, but interest in stand-up. I wanted to direct movies. I wanted to be a movie director. And then the whole like digital era came around and I never really pursued it because I didn't want to get into all that like digital editing. Like I was more like cut and snip, like edit, film that way. So I think senior year is when I started making people laugh and it really connected. I never wanted to really be a class clown until senior year. And I took a public speaking class, and then in the morning they did a televised morning announcements thing every morning from the technology room. And I
almost forgot about this. Yeah, were on.
I would be like an anchor on the morning announcements and do like weird stuff to make people laugh. And then we had an assembly one time. I want to say it was junior or senior year. And do you know who Frank Shinta is? He probably performs in Atlantic City too. He's like a Vegas guy, but he's originally from Buffalo. It's like the family's called the Shinta family, and they put on these big shows. But it was like one of these seminars to like say no to drugs for kids. Like that was the whole point of the assembly. And he's up there for like Mr. Ross brought him up, and he's doing like I want to say a 45 to 60-minute set, and we're busting our guts laughing. We're like, this is way better than school. Like, we just couldn't believe we had a stand-up comedian, and he was just killing it, telling jokes about hanging out with OJ and doing coke and stuff with OJ. And we're like, this is high school? But the whole point was like, say no to drugs. Funny enough, my wife and I ran into him in the Tampa airport, and I'm like, Frankie Shinta. And he's like, he looked at me like, you know who I am? But he's always doing like the local Buffalo telethon for the kids and stuff like that. But
was he appreciative though that you recognized him and said,
oh
hey?
yeah, he was really proud about it. Like,
I'm sure.
Yeah, he still like dyes his hair all dark and has the tan, and he still has his own. I don't know if he does a podcast, but he does stuff on like social media where he plays music and sings. But he does comedy too. He's just like kind of like a showman.
That's like Joey Diaz. He's been on Rogan a lot.
Yeah. He has a podcast, or maybe he did, Church of What's Happening Now.
I think, yeah. So he actually moved. I think he was a New York guy, moved to L.A., and then now he's back in South Jersey. So he actually lives in Jersey. He's out here too, but he's on Rogan a lot, whatever. And they kind of a whole crew that tour together. And Joey's funny as heck too. Because he's really just talking like, I think he's just talking jokes about his life, just how he grew up. Similar to what we're talking right now.
Yeah, like he was in prison a few times, and he hung out with the wrong crowd. He's got a foul mouth, but like he's hilarious. I always tuned into his show back when he had it going.
I got a funny Wally story that's a high school story that I just thought of too.
Let's hear it.
So one thing that you were a class clown, but you also showed up every day to class. Like, so you had a perfect attendance, and at the last day of school, at the award ceremony, they actually made an award for perfect attendance. But Dave, you got to love this. Who wasn't there to accept his perfect attendance award?
Wally.
Yeah.
And where were you?
So we were actually at our grandpa's funeral. So it was a serious, it wasn't a funny reason he wasn't there, but his buddies were like dying laughing because they didn't even know he was going to get it. Like, no, you don't tell your friends, like, I'm going to be perfect attendance.
Well, I don't even know.
When they announced it and they're like, is Wally here? Perfect attendance. Is Wally here? And they're just rolling like they knew that he was out of town.
But it's the funny thing is, this is like a story that you weren't there either.
I wasn't there, obviously.
We were in Arizona.
I was in Arizona, for Graham.
It's a story that we've heard from my friends because they were all there dying laughing, like, where is he? But
it's a funny story that you didn't even intend to be funny. It's just, it's one of those.
It just naturally happened.
It's like a curb, like I could picture rolling the curb credits, like Larry Charles, Larry David.
Yeah. So the thing that happened, so Grandpa passed away, and he was in Buffalo, and then they moved when we were really young to Phoenix, Arizona, to the Scottsdale area, and he passed away, and so we all went there for the funeral, and it was right at the end of the school year. Like, had it been like a week or two later, I probably would have had my perfect attendance and been there to receive it. But he always said, you got to use your voice. You're too quiet, and you're not going to get anything done unless you like vocalize it and like make it known. So then when we were there and he passed away, I found this little black notebook that he had. It might have been like a phone book, but all the pages were blank.
I didn't know this. Your first book was his?
Yeah, my first book that I wrote jokes in, and because we were all down and out because like we were sad that he passed away, and I just started jotting these stupid ideas to make myself laugh, but they were kind of sprung off of sign language because that was fresh because I was still like getting into that, and then Grandpa passed away, so I'm in my mind I'm like, because Dave, you were asking who really inspired me, and that's why I say Seinfeld, because now I'm trying to picture myself doing like a Seinfeld type of thing, writing in the way that he wrote, and then the voice I'm hearing is with like his delivery and everything like that. So I kind of was making my own sign language book by writing these jokes. I don't know if I really implied like to actually get on stage and do stand up, but I was just like, I'm writing jokes and I'm going to make a funny book. So, I mean, I think that was kind of it. The perfect attendance thing, that's still hilarious. And I think then I go to college, so I ended up, we were talking about doing, like I do drawings and cartoons, so I went to college for fine arts, and I went to Villa Maria in Buffalo and majored in fine arts, worked at a donut shop, and, towards the end of high school, I met these two guys, Craig and Will. They're kind of like, well, Will was kind of like a Farley and Craig was kind of like a Spade. They were kind of like, a big guy and a geeky little guy. Like they just looked like the perfect 10, and we'd hang out and just same thing. Like we carried on from where high school left off when we were just getting these weird situations and have these fun times. So, aside from that, I worked at this department store where I wasted a lot of my life, but that turns out where I met my wife.
You also wrote some jokes about it too.
I did.
Right? Like obviously having that customer service and it wasn't Men's Warehouse, but it was like suits and nice clothes and stuff like that. Where
the men's department.
But there was some comedy that came from it for sure. I do want to jump ahead a little bit just for the sake of time here, and with Dave being on with us. So jumping ahead to a little bit more recently, and you're at Side Splitters. And when you started there, you were wearing many different hats, right? You were doing sound, you were emceeing, you got an opportunity to feature. I want you to share your most recent opportunity there when you were just on stage a couple of weeks ago. So talk about, some of your favorite moments from Side Splitters, wearing any of the hats that you did. I'm sure there's like right now a stories popping on the top of your head about Side Splitters.
So, my wife had some family down here in Tampa. So, we end up, this is like 2017, we end up moving down here, and I didn't have it. Like I was doing good at my job in Buffalo and I just up and quit. She was working at an office job that actually had the big main office in Lakeland, Florida. So her family was down in Tampa though. So we all moved to like the Wesley Chapel, Tampa area, beautiful Tampa area. And, I'm doing like, I got this, job with her uncle. We're doing like, he works for air conditioning. He's got like, they do HVAC and stuff like that. So we're in this place and it's like 104 degrees and we're putting like Publix. It's like a kind of like a grocery store, kind of like a big chain like Wegmans or something like that up
Ragu knows Publix. He's down in Florida.
Yeah, I know Publix.
Yeah, so we're in a unfinished Publix putting in the AC unit, and there's this little ladder, and I'm climbing up, white knuckling it to the roof. It's like 104 degrees out, and I get to the top, and they're like, "Hey, Wally, we forgot the hammer." So I'm like, "Oh man!" And I climb all the way down, go get the hammer, like send Wally to do it. So I have these weird odd jobs because I have no clue what I'm doing in Florida. And then I think at one point I ended up being a private eye for this one company doing all sorts of stuff with that. And nearby, like maybe a couple miles down the road, I'm driving by and I'm like, Side Splitters. I'm like, oh, I got to check this out. It's like a well-known comedy club. So I go in there and the rest was history. Like the place is just comedy gold. I saw this job opening, like Mike was saying, for the sound booth, where you sit there in the back of the showroom. There's a sound booth where you're kind of like a DJ, but you also work the lights and everything like that. There wasn't really a curtain, but there's curtains on both sides. But it's like an A room, like A-list. They got like.
But you're responsible, like when that night's going on, you got to make sure you got every comic's music prepared, the part of the song they want, right? It's got to sound good. It's got to look good. The lights got to be. So it's not just like, oh, some kid's running the soundboard. Like it's pretty responsible role that they gave you.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And it was a good way for you to work your way in and get to know the owner, and you actually got to meet some of the comics too, didn't you?
A lot of comics. But the place was just like walking in the gold. Like I was amazed. You walk in, there's like the 8x10 headshots on the wall. Anywhere, the guys from Jim Norton to Tim Allen, they're all up on the wall. You smell that smell. It's like comedy cologne. Just like walking in the door, they got the popcorn machine popping. They still had the cigarette vending machine from like the 70s.
Is it similar? Yeah, Wally, is it similar to was it LA? Is it called the Laugh Factory? The Laugh Factory?
Laugh Factory. It's a little bit.
I feel like popularity market, probably, right? Popularity wise, it would be.
It's more on the lines of something like a Stress Factory in Jersey type of.
Yeah.
Or like the comic strip, something like that kind of play.
That's it, the comic strip. Yeah, exactly. I feel like every market has like their crew of comedians, right? Like that's their own base. And
yeah,
when you're
like the improv, there's comics that specifically work improv locations, and they're on that. I forget what they call it, but that's like their rounds when
Their
they do
network.
their network of touring.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the place was beautiful. I was just like, you look at the stage, and he had it set up kind of like, picture like the Wayne's World set, where there's like the couch and it looks like a basement with a brick wall in the background, and they had Three Stooges beer on the shelf and a lamp, and I was like, this is awesome. It was like a little set, and I'm in the back of the room, and I got this soundboard, and so many things could go wrong. So all the servers, we'd get there before the show, and they would walk everyone to the tables, and then I'd play like previews on the screen. And the second it went from silent to loud, I would shout, "It's about to get loud," and I'd blast the same song every time. ELP's "Welcome Back, My Friends," to the show that never ends. And Mike, in post, you got to add this song, because it's like, it's about to get loud, and then you just hear wah, 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 and like the music would start bumping, and like everyone's walking in and getting excited. At the time, when I first got there was this guy, Bobby Jewell, that ran the place. He was kind of a character in itself. He was like a comedian that never really made it, but he owned this comedy club. And then his second in command was this guy named Brian, who, he's one of the best managers I've ever had. I can't say a bad thing about the guy, but Bobby had this saying, and I don't know if it's even his own saying or if he just was like, he heard it somewhere and then he started using it. But he would always say, if the people want to see two flies have an intercourse, I got it. It's my job to book them. And it's like, obviously he didn't say intercourse though, but yeah, that was his like big saying. And he taught me how to properly do the announcements. Like there'd be a microphone right in the sound booth there. And so there were so many things that, like, you'd have the projection screen going up, the stage being set, the lights would be dim, and then you'd have to go bright. I'd be on the mic introducing the guys to the stage. So that's
a lot going on.
It's a lot to like run all at the same time, and like
they only have one guy do that. Like,
it's
what
one
if
guy.
you happen to get sick?
Like I had all these dials. It's
who's
like,
going to do it if Wally gets sick? I mean, there's 200 people in the room waiting for the night to happen. So does the owner run up and do it? I guess. Who knows?
A lot of the times, he would be right there. That's the cool thing about
Wally doesn't get sick.
Wally doesn't get sick. Perfect attendance, right? That's how, it's on his resume. Perfect attendance.
Where the hell's Wally?
But Wally, what I want you to do, so we can imagine this world of scene. You got this like perfect comedy club. You walked in. Last week you're frying yourself on the top of a ladder, like doing HVAC. You're like, what the hell am I doing? This is not what I'm built to do. This is not what I'm passionate about. You're doing, different gigs and the private eye thing for credit and all this stuff. And you're just like, man, this could be something really cool, a cool opportunity. So when did you transition from just being Wally, the sound guy, the lighting guy, to like, did you bend Brian's ear or Bobby at first and say like, I've done time? Because when you were in Buffalo, you performed some cool, stages, or you did some comedy clubs here, and you also did, open mics enough where you were comfortable on stage. So
yeah,
how did you make that transition?
Went from me being a kid writing jokes and
So you could take us back, but yeah, you could take us back to like when you finally got on stage and got the confidence to do that. But I'm just wondering, like, when you were at Side Splitters, how you made that come true.
So that's a tough thing, because like when you're an aspiring comic, you always have to start from scratch every time, especially if someone didn't see you. You can't be like, yeah, I've been doing it for 20 years or something. And they're like, okay, you got it. Like you've been in bands. When you're like, I got a band, you just say like, here's my CD. And then you're booked at some bar and they're like, okay, cool. And then
but nobody cares. It's very similar. Like, when I was trying out just to be in band at my church, and I told them I've been playing for 25, they still needed me to audition to prove that you can do it today.
Yeah. So it's just like, you still have to start from scratch. Like you still have to do all these open mics and things like that. So it's like I had Brian always said trust the process and go through all that stuff. So it's all the stage time I had in Buffalo, it kind of went out the window, and I had to start fresh in Tampa. Um, but yeah, he eventually got to the point where he's like, okay, you could get this opening gig come Easter time, Easter 2020. But I wanted to talk about like you were saying, like all the different performances and
Yeah, you were
comedians.
emceeing. I mean, you were driving comics around too. I mean, you were
Yeah,
doing
that's
pretty
another
much
thing.
anything.
Like wear many
Yeah,
hats when you're doing the sound booth. So
picking them up from the airport and stuff, or what?
I didn't pick them up from the airport, but they get dropped off at their hotel, and then I have to pick them up from the hotel. And I'm working a full desk job, and then at night I have to get out, gobble down some food, drive to this hotel, pick the comic up, drive him to the comedy club, hop in the booth, and then get the show up and running. And they don't know who you are. They're just like, oh, I got this black car showing up. So it's just me and my 2017 Kia Forte pulling up to this hotel. Anywhere between like Mike Vecchione, Gary Valentine, Ronzio Vance, Jackie Fabulous, Ryan Niemiller, Chris Jericho. I didn't give him a ride, but
The wrestler?
the wrestler,
Yeah,
he
the
was
wrestler
there.
just okay.
He didn't get on stage, but he was there. Joe Mackey one time. Do you know who that is? We were standing. I have this like.
Did he do one of those like reality TV comedy shows, like Last Comic Standing?
Yeah, he was on Last Comic Standing. And here I am, like in the Side Splitters men's room. I just have this like recollection. We're standing there, and this is before the partition was put in. It's just me and him at the urinals. Like, and he's talking to me about writing jokes, and he's got his black book. Like, swear to God, like he's a pro touring comic, and he still had his black book. He didn't go anywhere without it. It's under his arm. We're standing there taking a piss, and we're like talking about what joke works better. Oh, did that land? Did that work? Oh, that bombed. Get rid of this. And we're standing there like holding our junk like at the urinal at Side Splitter. Then one time we had a host that he was like an older guy, and at the time he was heavier. He lost a lot of weight since, but he's having some health issues. And Bobby's like, once he gets off and does his set, you got to drive him to the TGH. And I'm like, what's TGH? Because I didn't really know the area yet. So it's Tampa General Hospital, right? So during the show, I had to get him in my car, and he's like a big, tall dude, heavy set, and I had this little, Kia Forte. So I drive him to during the show to the hospital, and there's this like, it's kind of like in Tampa, they have this thing kind of like Mardi Gras, but it's a pirate festival called Gasparilla. They do it every,
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, so the streets are all closed off, crowded, parades, everyone's dressed like pirates. And I got this guy I'm trying to rush to the hospital. In hindsight, I always think like, Bobby, like, why didn't he just have me go up and like do a set instead of Clark going up there because he wasn't feeling good, and he should have just drove Clark to the hospital. Like that would have been my big break. I always think like, what? But of course he didn't do it. He sent me to drive him. That was a crazy story. Josh Blue one time, if you're familiar with him, I think he was also on Last Comic Standing and a bunch of other shows. He's selling merch after his show, and he's having me. He's got cerebral palsy, so his hands aren't working fast enough to gather the money and the cash and all that. So he had me helping him, and he's like
at the merch table?
At the merch table selling T-shirts and stuff, and he's like stuffing money in my pocket, like for helping him out. So I don't even know if he knew how much money he was making that night. He kept giving me like tip money, I guess, for helping him. So I just remember the next day I went and got a haircut, and I'm like, Josh Blue paid for my haircut. Like, I just thought that was a cool moment. We had this guy, Rich Guzzi, or Guzzi, I think it was pronounced. He did hypnotist shows, and he had his girlfriend Jolana running the show. We had all these songs set up on the iPad, and it was the zaniest thing. I still don't know if these people really got hypnotized or not, but they really believed that there was energy in the chairs at Side Splitters, and like the people that never got like put under, they always gave them like a hard time, or they had one too many drinks or something. They'd be like, okay, like bring them up with a different chair. That chair must not have good energy. And I'm like, this is the craziest shit. Like, what am I doing? I'm actually getting paid. Like back in the day, I would have to pay to go see comedy shows. I'm getting paid to be in this sound booth watching all this crazy stuff happen.
So Wally, let me ask you a question though. When kind of getting to that point where you are starting to become a comedian or full time and doing it, what's your writing process like? Walk us through kind of how do you start I don't know anything, like wouldn't know how to write a joke at all. So like how do you start from like, hey, this is where I'll start, this is where I think the joke should go. Like what does that process look like?
Yeah. I took a class with Rich
Lamb, right?
Lamb. Thank you. The name slipped me. Yeah, Rich Lamb at Comics Cafe in Buffalo. And someone in the class gifted me this book. It's called The Comedy Bible. And I have the page kind of taped off here, but we were talking earlier about Rocky LaPorte. He's got a whole section in there. So I learned how to properly write jokes and things like that through the Comedy Bible. I bought a ton of those little Mead pocket notebooks. I always, every single day, ask my wife or even my mom, Mike even knows, I always had a pen, like a black pen and a Mead pocket notebook in my back pocket.
It's got to be a Bic, right? A black Bic?
Yeah. But it was like, so we had cell phones. They were a thing, like people had them, but they were just a flip phone. So it wasn't like I was sitting there typing in my phone, like with a smartphone, like we could do nowadays. But I always just would whip my pen out and I'd stand there jotting. If I had a funny idea, you wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes with a funny thought, jot it down. And then you kind of have to like put it together, and like try to kind of tie it into making a story about it. There are comedians that are just like, I'm going to rant and go on and tell a story. A lot of guys, even I watched a show not too long ago where they were interviewing Larry David, and he thought when he first did stand up, he's like, I'm funny. I could just go on stage and be funny. He didn't realize that it was written and these guys
material.
were like working on material. And, he found out the hard way.
Well, is it similar to like a story where there's a beginning, middle, end, kind of act 1, 2, 3, and the big thing is the magic of tying that all together, correct?
Yeah.
Not always, but like that's kind of the formula.
The formula is the jokes consist of 3 parts. So you got your premise, your setup, and your punchline. The premise gets the audience on board. It's an easy way to like you could say, trying to think of an easy premise. Oh, what's scary, what's weird, what's stupid, what's hard about, whatever. For example, it's hard being coffee because you're always getting mugged,
Okay.
So, I know that's cheesy, but
right.
It's just something like that.
Like a pun or something that is
it's the surprise.
You just thought about it. You could be at your, you're making coffee in the morning or whatever, and you think of something silly, so you'd write that in your book. And then you're like, how can I work that into a set somewhere?
The surprise makes it funny, where you don't see it coming. And for whatever reason, psychologically, humans, when they don't expect it, you laugh. So that's kind of the science behind it. But it's tough to come up with something like sometimes you find something funny and, different audiences have different senses of humor or different styles that make them laugh.
That's got to mess with your head, right? Like you do, open mic at Side Splitters, you're getting more than half the room laughing, and then you go try a different club down the street and it might flop that night and you're like, I did that same joke, same delivery. And so then what do? You just go back to the drawing board, or do you try to...
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you try to find, you have to be you, and you can't be like, I'm just doing these jokes because I know these type of people
selfish reasons, yeah.
But it's kind of like, I'm going to be hypocritical here for a second, but the good thing is, and Dusty Slay he's a comedian, you might have known from Netflix and stuff like that, but he would get to a show 30 minutes early before everything would start, and he would sit in the back of the room, and I'm sure he's not the only one that does this, but he's the one that kind of taught me this, and you just read the room, like the old adage, read the room, and you look around, you're like, that guy's got a funny shirt, that guy, he looks weird, and you're like, oh, that lady's funny. So then
an inventory of characters that you can draw.
So then you get on stage, and now he went in knowing what set he was going to do, but now he's like, these people are the city crowd. They're not going to get the the rural type jokes of the country, talking like from the deep South. So I'm going to do something that more like ties in with the city folk. And, it's like, because he knows that's not you're going to hear crickets if you do this or that. So it's like, you do kind of have to wrap your head around what room, like it could be the 8
It's a
o'clock
craft.
show. Yeah, it's a craft. You could have the 8 o'clock show and you got them like in your hands. And then the 10 o'clock show, they're like,
It's a more
3
raucous
to the
crowd. Like they're a little
and it's
probably
like
half in the bag as they walk
they're
into
half
the
in the bag, and
place.
you're like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
these jokes worked 2 hours ago, and
Yeah.
now I'm doing the same exact set, and I'm not even. I could hear a pin drop, so it's tough.
So I want you to share. We're talking about Side Splitters. That's the most recent club that you've worked at, and like literally worked as a comic on stage. And you got this really cool feature for one of our favorite comedians, Rocky LaPorte. And so I know that was like a huge moment for you, but it wasn't like it happened overnight. I mean, it was supposed to happen a couple years ago, and I don't want to share the whole story, but how did that first come about? How did you get in Rocky's ear? And then tell us how you made it happen. How'd you actually get on that stage?
It's probably like one of my biggest and favorite performances that I did in Florida. It ties all together. So I mentioned earlier, like we used to watch as a family, like Rocky LaPorte, Comedy Central Presents. We watched it with Uncle Vinny, watched it with Dad, Mom. We used to laugh. He's just
Dave, do you know who Rocky LaPorte is? I feel like you would love him.
I know the name, but I'm sure if I seen him, I would know.
Okay, I'm going to send you his bit about the Staten Island Zoo. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right. So somehow I got into knowing him through like Facebook or something, and we're keeping in touch. And I was like, hey, I work at Side Splitters, and I saw his 8x10 on the wall. Like I was saying, there's everybody on there. And I was just like, how come you haven't performed there in a while, or what's the deal? And he goes, that owner, Bobby, I just, there's something going on. Like they had some sort of brush up, some sort of issues in the past, but he didn't want to get into it. And, I'm not really going to get into it here on the podcast either. So long story short, I was just like, well, at that time, Brian ended up taking over and Bobby sold the club to Brian. So now Brian was the man in command. So I'm like, I could just put in a good word and maybe Brian will have you back there. So of course I did. I told Brian, I'm like, hey, you should have Rocky LaPorte back. He's a buddy of mine, now that we were talking on Facebook and this and that. So Brian, he ended up saying, if we could get you on, maybe you could open for him Easter. It'll be Easter weekend. And that was in 2020. So I think I was going to the club. It was like a Thursday or Friday.
Was it Thanksgiving weekend, or I'm just trying to remember. It was Easter?
It was supposed to be Easter.
Okay.
So I'm like pacing around outside, out front in the parking lot, and my phone rings, and it's a Vegas area code. And I'm like, who the hell is calling me from Las Vegas? So I answer it, and it's Rocky LaPorte from Brad Garrett's comedy club at the MGM Grand. He's the guy that played Robert Barone in Everybody Loves Raymond. And I'm just like, oh my God, Rocky LaPorte's calling me on my personal cell phone from, this club at the MGM Grand. I'm like, this is awesome. And we're planning out him coming and to the club and getting Brian to book him for Easter weekend. We got Frankie Paul doing the feature act for like the Middler, and I'm hosting. So this is the whole talk of like the plan that was going on. Now, of course, the pandemic, that was 2020. So all this stuff went wrong. Rocky ended up being hanging around someone that had COVID, and you know how serious it was at the time. I mean, it's still serious, but like, it was just like, nope, plans are canceled. We have to reschedule a different comedian. And I'm like, well, can I still open up for Rocky? He's like, yeah, we're just going to reschedule it from Easter weekend to Thanksgiving weekend. So now I had to wait all those months. Plus there was the shutdown and all that stuff. So then he books it for Thanksgiving weekend 2020. And he couldn't make it. Steve Simone was the host. He's still a funny comedian. And Jared Waters was the middler, and I ended up hosting.
So the second attempt doesn't happen. That was in 2020?
Yeah, it was 2020. Wow. And so that was a good time. And Steve Byrne, he's another famous comedian. He did a guest spot during that weekend. He came in, he was doing crowd work.
Wait,
Like,
hold on. So Rocky performed, but you didn't get to open for him?
no, he couldn't make it because of the
Oh,
pandemic. He was rescheduled. We got
because you just said it was a good time, but I guess I was thinking that Rocky was there too.
it was still a good time. I still
Okay.
had a host. The show must go on. So Ro came in. She came to Tampa for Thanksgiving. So she
Our
had
sister.
Thanksgiving. Our sister, sorry, had Thanksgiving at our house, and took her to like Disney Springs and stuff like that. And I remember earlier in the day we went to Clearwater Beach, and I was roasting like a French fry at McDonald's. I get there, I'm on stage, in the spotlight with sunburn, and I'm like, what a dumb idea! Like, why did I do that today? I knew I was going on stage, but it was still a good time. But I always felt in the back of my mind like it wasn't how I pictured it going down. I was supposed to open for Rocky LaPorte, and I never got that moment. But then
Exclamation point felt a little
yeah,
tainted or
on
whatnot.
top of it.
So how do you keep it? How do you keep it driving with Rocky though? Did it feel like the possibility was still there?
I felt like the possibility was still there. We were still in touch and everything like that. And kind of another thing that put a damper on this, well, it really put a damper on the whole thing on top of it. Over the next couple weeks, Dad got COVID. And then a few weeks later, so that's the end of November, going into early December, Dad passed away. And then, that was the absolute worst thing that could have happened. And I never got that Rudy moment where Dad could actually like see me perform at Side Splitters or open for Rocky LaPorte. So it really like took, it was like a kick in the nuts,
Did he know about it though? Did Dad know about it?
He did. That one of my last real conversations with them was like, I want to say days before it was supposed to be Rocky and it wasn't Steve Simone yet. I was in the parking lot about to go to work, and I just happened to call my mom, and he picks up the phone because he sees my number pop up on the TV. So he answered the phone. He always used to do that, and he'd be like, "Hey, pronto," and then he'd get all Italian on me. And then I'd talk to him, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm opening up for Rocky LaPorte," and he was all proud of me, and we had this cool conversation. But it never really happened. Never had that moment.
He was definitely with you just a couple weeks ago as you were on stage making it happen for real.
Right. So I'm going to try to fast forward, we're pressed for time. So then Fatherhood happened. I went from doing stand-up to pulling up pull-ups with my kids. And, I ended up doing daddy daycare for a year last year. But my kids, they're like my biggest fans, and they love to laugh. They're silly. My son babbles like an Asian lady doing a manicure. He's like, you bite your nail. Like, I don't
Charlie's a ham, man. He looks just like you too. Like when I got to, see you as a kid, and I just go back and see him. It's like a splitting image.
Yeah. So then I started doing I kind of took a break from going to Side Splitters after Dad passed away. I quit the job, the sound booth gig. And I just started doing comics, drawing cartoons on the iPad and things like that. And then I had a deal with my demons. I recently got back up on stage. I went to Larry Venturino's club in Estero, Florida. I opened for Jay Hewlett. He was on Showtime and stuff like that, comedians at Denny's. I did a few underground comedy shows in Lakeland. And then all of a sudden I see Rocky LaPorte is getting booked. So I didn't even get to say this. So when I was working at the Tampa club in the Tampa Side Splitters, we were living in the outskirts of Tampa in a town called Wesley Chapel. The second my wife and I moved to Lakeland to get closer to where she was working, Brian opened another Side Splitters location in Wesley Chapel in a movie theater. So I was kind of like, man, timing's really literally everything in stand-up. And I felt like I missed the boat. So now here we are, it's 2024, and I see Rocky LaPorte's getting booked again at the Wesley Chapel Side Splitters. So I asked Brian about it, and he's like, I haven't seen you perform in a long time. I know you've been doing these shows in Lakeland, these underground shows. So just like I said earlier, I had to get right back at it. Do the open mic at Side Splitters. Brian sat in the back of the room. He's the coolest dude ever. He watched my set, and he's like, all right, what about Friday night? So I showed up. Rocky was there. It was probably like my third or fourth time meeting him. We met him one time. It was right before we moved to Florida. It was
At Helium. We were after the Bison's game.
yeah. So the Bisons are like the AAA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays baseball team in Buffalo. So we went to the game, and I'm like, "Hey, Rocky LaPorte's performing at Helium downtown Buffalo." He told me
Hey,
this.
good for you.
Yeah, good for you. He told me when I saw him this time around, he goes, "Yeah, that night Paul McCartney was performing at the arena, and the arena and the comedy club were almost like next door to each other." He's like, "So I remember it being real dead in there because everyone went to go." He's like, "No one went to go see me; they all went to go see Paul McCartney." But from what I remember, I don't remember it being that same weekend. But he would remember better than we would. He had to get up on stage that night.
And I know Paul McCartney did play it during that time. So
Yeah, and I remember telling
sense.
him like when we were leaving that night, or I'm like, "Well, in a few days I'm moving to Tampa," and he's like, "Well, when I'm down there, let me know and we'll perform and you could open for me." So I always had that little nugget in my mind, like this is possible, like I can make this night happen. So here it is. It was a few weeks ago. It was like August 9th. It was a Friday night, and I hosted. No, actually, I didn't host. It was just a guest spot, but Victoria Yepes hosted, and she was the one who trained me how to do the sound booth at the original Side Splitters. So that was kind of like a full circle moment. And then the middler, like the feature act, was Lou Angel Wolf, and he's hilarious. He's been doing comedy for 40 years. I was doing jokes about turning 40, and he's like, "I've been doing stand up for 40 years." Like it was kind of like we had that connection. And Rocky, of course, he was great. Always on the ball. And the guys running the show, Vinny was the bartender at Side Splitters in Tampa. And now, because Brian can't be at both clubs at the same time, he kind of had Vinny be in charge at the Wesley Chapel Side Splitters location. And Vinny was like kind of like walking me through it. And he's like, "Hey, that projection guy, you want to go up and see what the projection room's like?" Because as a kid, you always dream of going up in a movie theater projection room, and it was pretty cool. And they had the whole thing's like set up with a stage, and it was like a comedy club but in a movie theater. So it was cool seeing like telling jokes upwards because the people were in like stadium seats. So I finally got that moment performing with Rocky. It was like a dream come true.
That's awesome.
And
do you think it was better that it was at a different location because you knew the Wesley or you knew the Tampa location more? So maybe you would have been on stage thinking about stuff like, I used to be over there. I remember, like, maybe you would have built it up too much, and the fact that it was something new and different, you just went for it. Or were you not even thinking about that at all?
It could have. I was more, all the other comics before getting up there were like, yeah, it's kind of daunting because you're telling jokes upwards. The laughs are going upwards. It's not just a room with like a flat ground with everyone in tables.
Yeah, normally you got the high ground, which is kind of a dominant
you're in the stage
position.
Down at everyone.
You're in control.
Yeah, sight lines, but there are tables on the floor, like on the main ground level, and there's tables going around the front of the stage where they're at like ground level, and then there's the movie theater seats that go up. So what happened is like when you're in the spotlight, that deep crowd of the audience up in the stadium seats, they kind of go into like a gray blur, and then you got your spotlight blinding you, so you don't even see them anyway. I just saw the people in front of the stage. So when I'm like talking with the crowd and like associating with the crowd, it was great sight lines. It felt
first couple rows.
Yeah, first couple rows. It's like intimate. Everything was fine. It was a great room to work. I loved it. Like I think it made a good bookend. And I thought about this like after doing stand up for 2 decades. I think I'm going to announce it on this podcast, but I think I'm deciding to hang my boots.
And why is that, man? As your number one fan for the longest time, I'm a little disappointed to hear that. I feel like this was a moment that should springboard you into maybe the next realm. It
was fun. I got to have my cake and eat it too, and I always wanted to do it, and it was fun. Comedy's kind of a love-hate. There's a lot of anxiety that goes into it, and a lot of things don't work out, and a lot of things it's a lot of hard work that it looks fun, looks like you're just whipping things together, but there's a lot that goes into it. But I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's grueling. It's a lot harder than it looks, I should say. But I think it's as good as it gets for me, and I'm grateful, and I'm
Like
grateful
you
for
feel
what
like that was a
kind of
good
like tying your little
Tying
thing.
the bow.
Yeah.
BGBG.
Do
Be
you
great, be
feel
grateful. Yeah. I just
That's
want to say,
right.
Dave, before you get it to that, so you feel like you put that exclamation on it then?
Yeah, I feel like it's a good bookend, like the whole Rocky LaPorte thing. He was one of the guys that, when we were talking about earlier, watching stand up with my parents, watching comedy specials, he was one of the ones that busted, like, we would bust a gut to him, like, he was so funny. And then we got into meeting him, and we met him in Buffalo. I was up and coming, aspiring comic in Buffalo. I moved to Florida, you know, he says, "Hey, maybe you could open for me next when you get to Tampa." And I'm like, "All right." And then so much went wrong, and Dad passed away, and then I had this moment, and it was just like, I'm good. I got kids now, and I can't. I'm never gonna be like a road comic. I'm never gonna be driving around or touring around. Like, I just can't picture doing that at 40 years old. Like, starting now. I mean, I guess never say never, but I think I'm good. Like, I think I've
You
seen a
got it.
lot.
Like, I don't want to say you got it out of your system, but you feel like you got, and Dave, you got a question. I'll let you get to it.
Well, I was going to say, do you feel, I look at it the other way too, is also, do you feel like you have a stronger love for writing or to be a cartoonist, and that's kind of pulled you in a different direction?
Not really. I always feel like the inner comedian's always going to be there. Um, I just I don't feel like I have an audience or a following. Like, it's not like I'm doing all this stuff, but it's just like, I just got the handful of friends and family that are like, "Oh, cool." But it's just like, I'm doing it to entertain that 8-year-old self of mine, that little, like I think Seinfeld once said that, comedy's like the weeds in the sidewalk. Like when you're walking about through like down a sidewalk and you see those little weeds through the cracks that are growing. It's like, it's in there. Like the comedy's inside me, and it's gonna get out eventually. Like, no matter where I am, in the office, at work, at home, like that weed's still gonna crack through the sidewalk, and I'm gonna be like cracking jokes, and whether you guys
Yeah,
like
it's
it or
on
not. I mean,
stage or
yeah,
with the family or whatever. Well, I say, I think it's a great exclamation point for your story up until this point, but I wouldn't rule out the fact that you could always jump back in and dust off one of those Mead notebooks and get one of your big pens out and start writing some more whenever you feel the time is right. And a little Dr. Phil moment on the show. I haven't had one of these, but just as your brother, like, I just love watching you do comedy. I think when I see you, I know when I see you up there, I'm like, he's got it. Like, you have it. You got the ability to, if you wrote and really worked on your craft and that was the only thing you were responsible for, obviously, like you said, you got your two beautiful kids and my nephew and niece. And like, obviously you got, and Bridget too, your wife. So your focus is there, which is totally commendable. But I know if you put your time and energy in the same way that anybody who's on Netflix, I'm telling you, man, I do believe you have what it takes. So, yeah, that's my little Dr. Phil for you. Like, if you do want to go to that level, you do have what it takes. And anyone who's seen you do comedy knows it. What I want to say too, I have another follow up to that. Dave, do you have to run, or you got time for a couple more?
I got another 10 minutes is good.
Okay. So, Wally, someone right now is listening in and they're thinking, maybe they're 10 years old, 15, 20, 50 years old, doesn't matter. And they're like, man, I've always wanted to get up on stage. Kind of nervous about it. I think I want to get started, but I don't know what's my first thing I need to do. So what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to get into it? And now that you've lived it through your story and you can look back now and maybe do some things differently, what would you tell someone if they started today?
Good question. Well, you got to have a good sense of humor to survive, I think. You got to trust the process. I mentioned earlier, go to do the open mics, just do them. They suck. I hate open mics. I've always hated open mics.
Is it because like your audience is 50% of other comics and they just want their time? And
If not 90% sometimes. But yeah, they're all the comics are in the back of the room, and they all think like I say they, but like I'm one of them. So it's like, y'all think you're the funniest guy in the room, and everyone else is like, for whatever reason, especially like the New York and Buffalo comics, like they weren't really welcoming. I was never like,
You feel critiqued. You're up there with
yeah,
9 people
I was
critiquing
never
every
in,
word you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, I was more, uh, like conventional and old school, where like they were like in the weed smoking crowd and like the hipster crowd, and they're all like mingling in the back of the room and like ha ha ha, and then they'd laugh at the dirty jokes, but they wouldn't laugh at the creative, cleverly written jokes. And then anyone else that was in the crowd always seemed like, this guy pulled his friend from work or his cousin or his brother. They're there to root for them and cheer them on, but like they're not here to see me.
But is it a necessary evil? Like you do have to have, do you think you have to go through that to get
You
to
do.
the next step?
I did.
Yeah.
For many years, I thought like it's a waste of time. And you put all day long, you're like, I'm getting on stage tonight. And it's like you try to rehearse and memorize your set. And then you get there and you're like, it seems like everything's out the window and it's just all gone to waste. But Brian always says, you got to trust the process, He's the guy booking the club. And if he's in the back of the room and he hears you, any one of these people that they're like, ha ha, like imagine having 250 of them doing that. Now you got a whole room busting up laughing. So you could make it happen if you just trust the process, make friends. I would suggest have comedy buddies. Don't do what I did. Get on stage as much as possible. Just keep doing it. Even if you're just hanging out at the comedy club and you're just always seen, and you're just always constantly there, which is tough. Like if you have a family, like if you're 20 something, like you were saying, young, that's pretty much your life. Make it you literally have to give it your 110%, spend as much as of your day at the clubs and night at the clubs. The more you're seen, the more comfortable you'll get and the better your chances are at getting booked. And the more stage time you get, like the more comfortable you get on the stage, the more comfortable you are working with different types of crowds and things like that.
Yep. You got to be in the game.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll say too, obviously, and I was just going to give a little love to one of our sponsors, Social Chameleon, my company, as you guys know, and Dave knows. Transform your podcast, socialchameleon.us. But the reason I bring us up is before I was getting into podcasting, the thing we did was social media content. We still create it for podcasts. And I would say too, Wally, like one of the big things in the game now, I mean, it's a non-negotiable, is whenever you perform, get that content on social. And so I know you were saying it was tough. A lot of you felt like your audience in person and online is a lot of close friends and family, which is true. But also, I know you didn't have the interest to do Instagram and or TikTok. That's just not your style. Like maybe if someone did it for you, I think you'd be fine. But and you could have hired someone to do it. Like hire someone, a high school intern, and do your TikTok channel. But I just want to spit out that like you just gave great advice, and then I just wanted to add to it. Once someone is getting those reps, to get video of it and just get it out there, man, so people can discover it.
Yeah, that is a big thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Schultz, but he has like a big following on social media, and now he's like touring and he's like in everything. He's at like he'll pop up and make appearances and like bit parts in movies. He
was in Tom Brady's roast.
Yeah, he did Tom Brady.
Is he the guy with the mustache?
Yeah, and he's got the shaved side.
He was pretty good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
He's kind of got like an Italian thing about him. You wouldn't know it by his.
Speaking in Italian funny comedians, and I know you already know him, Dave, and Wally, I think I've sent you some stuff. Nicky Cass. All right. If it wasn't for social media, he just threw out the first pitch at a Yankees game and they created this Coach Al character. Have you seen his Coach Al stuff? I know, Dave, you have, but Wally, you haven't.
So funny.
I got to send it to you. He does this funny high school coach where he's real rough on the players. And he's like, "What are you doing? Hey, Spadini, I'm hitting the ball right up the middle." So, and he's acting it perfectly. And it's always Spadini screwing up. The Italian kids out there always screwing up. And he's got this big fake, like it's totally 2 or 3 pillows in his gut. And he's perfectly being that high school, or even little league coach that everybody's experienced in their life. Everyone's had one of these guys tell them how to take a grounder. And he did these videos and he would get thousands and thousands and 10,000s and millions of views. And the Yankees actually had him do a skit with like Aaron Judge and Soto in it. And he's acting in this as Coach Al with the player. Derek Jeter makes a cameo in it. And he's like, Coach Al, never heard of the guy. And yeah, so
he's a local guy too. I think I told you that, Mike.
From Jersey?
He's a local to me. He's next town over from me. And actually he played baseball where my boys play baseball. So sometimes you'll see him have a PPH shirt on. That PPH Mafia is my boys' team.
That's awesome. Hey,
so he's been to a few practices.
I got to come to a summer barbecue and do a little wiffle ball action.
Right.
Adults versus the kids.
We got a big wiffle ball.
I know Wally doesn't know what I'm talking about here, but a couple episodes ago, Dave shared that he's mean on the mound.
Ooh. Throw a mean wiffle ball?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Throw a mean wiffle ball. Here's what I'm going to say. I know we got to wrap up here. This was great, Wally. Super excited and happy to have you on. And I'd love to have you on again. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about cartooning next time, or just show some of your artwork. I know we didn't really get a chance to get to it. I'll do it right now, though. Since we're talking about it, I'm going to show some of your cool artwork where you're doing like Rodney Dangerfield and Mr. Bean and Harlan Williams, a lot of your favorite comics.
Yeah, a lot of portraits of famous comedians. And
which ones would you like me to showcase? I know some of them you're like, really, they came out great.
Yeah, any of them are good. Yeah, just
very cool.
Surprise the audience.
That's awesome.
I'll surprise you guys. And, Dave, did you have any other things that were like, you just wanted to get out?
I wanted to tell him about Charlie from New Jersey, but
okay.
He's got to go.
I don't know if he's got time for a whole Charlie story.
We'll end on that. We'll end on Charlie from Jersey. Go ahead.
Charlie from Jersey.
So my very, very first time going to Orlando, this is before America's Got Talent and all the shows that you see, like Last Comic Standing and all these things. This was a talent thing called Talent Rock. And this, talk about social media, it was all promoted on MySpace, like when they had comedians having their own pages. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to sign up. So just to sign up, it was like $1,300. The flight was included. The hotel was included. You'd be there. It was like 3 days at the Gaylord Palms Resort in Orlando. So I signed up to do this thing. SNL's Ellen Claiborne was the host. And then there's a male host, and I want to say it was Nick Lachey from like 98 Degrees or whatever. He has like a bunch of shows now on Netflix. But come to find out, like the whole thing was a sham. There's this, talk about Netflix, there's a show you could watch if you ever want to kill time. The guy's name's Lou Pearlman. The special is called Dirty Pop, the boy band scam on Netflix. Yep. So you've watched it? You watched it? Yeah, Transcontinental Airlines. This guy had like a blimp company. Mike, you didn't see it, right?
I haven't seen it, no.
Yeah, he's got like this blimp company that he turned into a record label. He managed the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC.
And what was this guy doing there? He was hosting
Brooke Hogan. He ran the whole Talent Rock event. But the thing was just like to get in our pockets, and like all this money was just going directly to his transcontinental thing.
Everyone's paying for a dream. Everyone's there. One person there might get a shot at something.
And it was like AGT. So like everyone thought I'm going to do stand up. I'm going to do like magic. I'm going to be modeling and this and that. So all these talented people, like we're all these young people, there was like swarms of us walking around, and we had those, those little, number things like they have like when you're
like an Olympic runner or whatever, marathon runner.
All on our hips, and we're walking around. They're like, don't take your talent numbers off. You don't know who's going to be walking by, and you don't know who's going to be judging, and this and that. So we're going through this whole thing, and I ended up doing like a set. I got one big laugh from the guy he ran the improv in Orlando and this and that. And then I was just like, I didn't win. I didn't make it to the next round and this and that. And I'm like, I just spent, when you're in your young 20s, you're like, I just blew $1,300 on this stupid event. And I still didn't know it was all a sham from Lou Pearlman. And I'm at the bar and I'm like doing a shot of whiskey or something. And this old guy, he reminds me of like Woody Allen, but he's got this like super strong New Jersey accent. And he's like laughing. And I'm like, the hell up with this guy? And he looks down at my number. He's like, what are you waiting in line at the deli? And he's just like saying all these weird lines. He's like, shake my hand. Then I like shake his hand. And he's like, what do you got, a raw fish? He's like, shake my hand like a real man. And he's just like this crazy cartoon character. I'm like, who the heck is this? Come to find out, we'll call him Charlie from New Jersey. That's kind of how he introduced himself. He knew I was down and out because I didn't make it through the contest and all that stuff. So he's like, I'll tell you what, I'll get you a flight to a continental flight to New Jersey. Come hang out with me. I'll drive you into the city. We'll go through New York City. We'll go to Caroline's. We'll go to the Stress Factory in Jersey. We'll go like all around New York City. We went to the Parkside Lounge, the comedy.
So he doesn't end up being a serial killer. He's actually backs up.
So
I could see it on Dave's face. He's like, the guy just offered you to do all that out of the blue. Like, it sounds like a episode of.
I remember Mom picked me up from the airport, and she's like, "So how was this Talent Rock event?" And I'm like, "I met this old guy from New Jersey. He's invited me over. He wants me to stay at his house." And she's like, "What the hell?" And his house is like beautiful. Like picture like one of these like 18th century mansions in New Jersey, like on the beach. And his driveway to his house, like they made it like into like, this isn't his house. I'm saying it was one time a big mansion, and then the mansion they must have got rid of, and then they put houses on the driveway. So that's his street that Charlie lived on.
And didn't he take you out like in his Porsche and
he had a Porsche,
top down?
He had his own boat, like in his backyard. He had like.
Just curious, where did he live?
He was in. It was Little Silver.
Okay, yeah.
And we hung out in Red Bank a lot. We spent a lot of time in Red Bank. And
Dave's got a grin. He knows Charlie from Little Silver.
He
knows him. He's got a guy.
There was all these different. Like,
I got a guy.
But so Charlie was one of your like early mentors then doing stand up, right?
Mm-hmm. Long Branch. You familiar with Long Branch?
Yeah, of course. It's all next. It's 30 minutes from my house.
So I never had how close?
Like 30 minutes from my house.
Oh, not bad. Yeah, so it's like people say sometimes they'll ask me like, "Did you ever have a manager or something like that get you through?" But he took me to all these clubs, but this guy had no clue about stand up. He was just a naturally funny guy, just nice, helpful. I flew there a couple times. He flew to Buffalo to see me perform at a talent show
at your college, right?
Villa Maria. Now, were you there that night? I was going to ask you.
I was there.
So you went to Salvatore's. He took us out to dinner.
Yeah, I was there, and I remember I was getting a kick out of him because I don't know if you were on stage or if you were with us. Were you backstage the whole time, or did you sit with us while we were watching the other acts? Because I remember him going out loud, like someone said something on stage, and he's like, "Hey, good for you." That's where we got that line.
Good for you, and like that, he said it out like
that was
the whole place. You could hear a pin drop, and then he goes, "Good for you."
Good for you.
But his best line that night. So at Salvatore's, I don't know if they still have it. So haven't been there in a long time, but it's really gaudy Italian. It's like a big Italian restaurant,
big Italian wedding banquet,
like a banquet hall. Well, they got these like life-size people. They're almost like wax figures, like all over the place in the room, like the restaurant room where you eat. And
not almost wax. They're wax.
Are they wax or
I
don't
think
know if
so,
they're actual wax or statues?
Yeah, like the wax museum. Like Dave, you can imagine
people.
Yeah,
like a chef. It's like
where the hell did that chef go? I don't know. There's a stuffed chef in the next room. Looks just like him.
And it's kind of creepy. And so we're all sitting there like, how do you like the food? Because we went there because like the guy he's pretty wealthy. So like I think my parents wanted to treat him out to a nice restaurant in Buffalo. So we're there. And he's just like, oh, like we were asking him, is the food good? He's like, yeah, it's really good. The people never leave. Like, because they're all these like weird figurines.
All the mamachas standing around.
Yeah, but it was just like he said it so quick-witted and not like
he should do comedy. Like Charlie was he was one of those naturally effort, just has everybody like wrapped around,
I still keep in touch with him every now and again, but it kind of fizzled out. Like I was hanging out with him and doing all that stuff, and it kind of, for whatever reason, he has like his own business that he was running, and I think the recession hit and all this stuff. So, But anyway, he's a funny guy, and he was helpful. And I thought you'd enjoy that with like some of those locations that we went to. And
Yeah, the Jersey connection. All right, we got to figure this out. Are we going to Jersey to hang with Dave, or when Dave is down in Florida working at one of his Ford's garages, do I come down and hang with you guys? I feel like Florida might be a good getaway for me, maybe in the wintertime.
For sure, come down.
Yeah. How often are you down in Tampa, Dave?
It's kind of ebbs and flows, but I would say probably every other week.
Every other
most
week?
Months probably. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like twice a year.
No, I'm down there a lot.
So that's
I'm not down there for a
dunk.
week at a time. Yeah, so I'm there for like 2 days, 3 days sometimes, depending on what I got going on.
Well, I think we all should go hang out at Side Splitters and have a shot.
Let's do it.
Cheers to Wally getting that opportunity with Rocky LaPorte. Really cool story.
Super nice guy. He's another one that's super nice. Always got good things to say, and he's helpful. After the show, he was giving me tips and stuff about timing and, different tags that he would give me for, different jokes. So.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for hanging out with us until the end. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like this video, subscribe to help our channel out so you get to see more of our latest and greatest episodes. On Apple, you can do that as well. Follow us there, or on Spotify. And we got great episodes coming to you. Dave is now officially our co-host, so all the new episodes you see after this one, you should start to see Dave consistently. Wally, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your stories, and just...
yes, thank you.
I love you, brother.
No
and
problem.
I mean that literally. And just say hi to the family for me, and give Charlie and Gracie some love for me.
Oh, I thought you were going to say fist bump.
Fist bump. Yeah, give Charlie a fist bump and Gracie a kiss. And again, so check out Linktree. It's in the show notes. Any last words you want to say before you go?
You were talking about the Linktree, but so it's kind of on there anyway. But the blog, I have this blog called In Between Routines that I worked on last year, and it wraps up my whole 2 decades in comedy. So it's actually inbetweenroutines.wordpress.com.
There you go.
I don't pay for it, so there are some advertisements and
Yeah.
stuff. But if you
We'll make it clickable so they don't have to go ahead and type all that in. So
all right, but yeah, once you get to the bottom of each blog, there's like a link to the next one. So you just click on that, and it takes you directly to the next. So like chapter 1, and at the bottom you'll see chapter 2, so on and so forth. So it's pretty easy
thanks to the
use.
next one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I don't have my BGBG mug, but you know the drill. Be great and be grateful. Grateful for you guys both being on the show.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
for having me.